danger lurking? Is this your dream home or a nightmare? Before you buy this home, you're going to want and need to listen to this. We're going to talk about the truth behind home inspections, what first-time home buyers need to know before you fall in love with that dream home, that kitchen, the dream kitchen, the backyard oasis. There could be tens of thousands of dollars hiding behind those walls. Today, we're going to pull back the curtains with one of the best home inspectors in the business, my man, Ryan Wheaton from Cornerstone Home Inspections. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on this early Saturday morning. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I just want to let's tell the people about you. How long have you been doing this?
So I started in the construction industry. I started working with my grandfather. He's been in the construction industry his whole life. He taught me everything I know. I started in commercial construction. I did commercial construction, remodeling, and maintenance for Friendly's, Dunkin' Donuts, 99 restaurants, and Olive Gardens. I did that for about 14 years, but it was long hours and a lot of jobs were pretty far away. So then I transitioned to working for the town, where I had 200 apartments that I did all the maintenance on. I've been doing inspections now. I started my own company. I've been doing those for about 6 years. I do about 200 inspections a year. I've done thousands of inspections. I like to take my experience from my time in the construction industry and port that over to doing inspections. I've done a little bit of everything. I've done concrete work. I've framed houses. I've done electrical and plumbing work. I've had my lead abatement license, my asbestos supervisor's license. I've done solar panels. I've done commercial roofing. I mean, it's easier for me to name what I haven't done than things that I have done. So I like to tell people that I work with this now instead of these.
For sure. I always tell the story on how we met. I had a listing in Hamden, and I don't want to say I study, but I pay attention to to the home inspectors when my clients get a home inspection, and it kind of trained me on how to look at a house, what to kind of look for in a house when I'm showing a property. So I had this listing, and it's like, all right, we go through the house, and we check some stuff out. They made some minor repairs before we put it on the market. Then we put it on the market. We're thinking we knew there was some defects that we were gonna have to deal with, but we put it on the market. Buyer gets a home inspection. I'm telling my clients, yeah, don't worry about it. It's gonna be all right. We already went through the house. We're good. And then they send in the inspection report and ask for some repairs to be done. And it wasn't crazy repairs, but I'm just like, who checks this stuff? I can't remember what it was, but it was something up there, and I'm like, who checks this stuff? And I think I called you in the middle of the transaction, like, bro, what's your deal? I'm like, where are you from? What are you doing? And then you're like, yeah, I'm in Massachusetts. I'm like, you came all the way here from Massachusetts? You remember that?
Yeah, yep. Working in construction all these years, I'm just used to driving. So I service all of Connecticut. And I remember the next inspection that I worked with you on, you filmed me the whole time. You showed up with a tripod and you filmed me. I was like, what is going on here?
And I wasn't filming you to be negative about it, but I'm like, nobody's gonna believe this. Like nobody's gonna believe this guy. He checks everything. I follow your Instagram. What's your Instagram?
Cornerstone 413.
Cornerstone 413. He's always putting some crazy stuff on his Instagram that he finds in his home inspections. But yeah, I was just recording because I'm like, nobody's gonna believe this. I've dealt with some commercial inspection companies. I've dealt with some small. When I say commercial, I mean big companies, and I've dealt with some brick and mortar style inspection companies. I I found that you do the best inspection and at the best price. Can I say that? This is what
You
it
telling
is.
me I should raise my prices?
I, I don't want to. I don't want to make you raise your prices, man. But it's definitely a great value. But um, and I tell people all the time. I've had this tagline since I started this podcast. I have curated a team. Like, like my team is handpicked with nothing but the best, man. So I'm glad to have you as my guy, man. But what do you think separates Cornerstone from other inspectors?
I would definitely say, hands down, my experience. You know, our company's tagline is inspectors with experience.
Nice.
I don't know if many people know this. When I put myself back to school to become an inspector and started the class, there in the whole class there was maybe me and one other guy who came from the construction background.
Mhm.
There is no requirement for a construction background to be a home inspector. Most of the guys in that class that I was in, not to put them down or anything, but they had retired from an IT job or retired from a retail job, and they're like, I'm going to go inspect homes now.
Mm.
And that blew me away. These guys had never picked up a hammer, but now you're going to go inspect homes and tell people what's wrong with them.
Wow.
So I say that's what sets me apart. I've done this all by hand. When I'm looking at stuff that needs to be repaired, it's usually something that I've actually repaired in person before.
Mhm.
So that sets me aside from my competition. I've done it. I didn't learn it out of a book.
Nice, nice. And what are what's one thing that you've seen that buyers are always shocked to learn? You know, when they meet you and go through your report.
The number one comment I get all the time from realtors and clients, and it actually reflects in my Google reviews too, is just how thorough I am.
Mm.
Everyone says, wow, you really went through everything. You were really thorough. And then they get the report and they say the same thing about the report, how thorough it is.
I did what was that last year? I did a flip and I was saying your praises to the buyer, and the buyer goes, "Yeah, I'd like to hire your guy to do a home inspection on the house." And I'm like, I didn't think this through. I didn't think this through. I got Ryan on the other side. But it was cool being on the other. Well, it wasn't, but it wasn't bad because we did a good job on the flip, and some of the things that you pointed out. Um, I honestly don't think we would have known. Even the contractors that was working, they would have known that those things were there. And I told him, I'm like, listen, you guys better be ready to get to work, because I'm sure he's gonna find something, because he is thorough, for sure. But for first time home buyers, what exactly is a home inspection supposed to do? Let's dive into this real quick.
So the purpose of the home inspection is to do a visual inspection of the condition of the property on the date and time of the inspection. Okay, so that's one thing you got to remember, that I'm not a fortune teller. I can give you in ballpark range of about how long things will last for, but that's not a guarantee.
Mm.
The point of the home inspection is basically to educate you about what that house needs.
Mhm.
You got to keep in mind that you're putting a lot of money down when you're going to buy a house. Buying a house is pretty much the most expensive purchase you're ever going to make in your life
Yes, sir.
for the average person.
Mhm.
So you need to know what that house needs and what you need to budget for down the road.
Mm.
I'm not there to just rip the house apart. I'm there to educate you about what the house needs. I like to say that houses don't fail inspection. Okay, sometimes I get people who ask me at the end of the inspection, well, did the house pass?
Right.
And it's like, no, well, the house doesn't pass or fail. It's more so, is this the right house for you?
Mm.
Can you afford what this house needs for maintenance? Because all houses need maintenance and all houses have something that needs to be repaired. I've never had an inspection come through completely clean, ever.
Ever.
Not even on new construction. I still find things on new construction.
Right. And a lot of people think that, I mean, like especially here in Connecticut, and I'm sure it's the same in Massachusetts, but a lot of these houses are old. And some people think that they might be better off in terms of inspection and not having to deal with repairs, so I'm just going to buy a new house. And I from what I've seen, I think that's completely false. um New construction has just as many problems. You might get more life out of it, before you have to make a repair maybe, but new construction has issues as well. You agree?
Oh yeah, one of the stories I like to tell people is I was doing an inspection on new construction. They were still finishing some of the work while I was there.
Mhm.
And one of the things I do during the inspection is I fill the tub up about a quarter of the way,
Mm.
make sure that it holds water, and then I let the stopper go, make sure that it drains correctly. So
Mhm.
all the water drains out of this tub, and I still hear water coming, and I'm like,
Mm.
uh-oh. Ran down to the basement. It's a finished basement, carpet, ceiling, drywall, everything, and that water is pouring through the ceiling.
Mm.
Luckily, there's a trash can there, so I pulled the trash can over to catch the water.
Mhm.
In a big project like that, sometimes you have multiple contractors who are working on top of each other. One contractor doesn't care what the other contractor needs to do.
Mhm.
What must have happened was the drywallers came in and they drywalled the basement before the plumber ever hooked up the drain to the bottom of the tub,
Mm.
or the connection where it was hooked up wasn't done right. So in that case there, I found a hidden defect that the buyer wouldn't have known until they moved in.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. So yeah, new construction, you gotta watch out too. What are like the top five components, or the top five parts to a house, or well, I wouldn't even put five, but let's just say, what are the most important features of a home, components of a home, that a buyer should pay close attention to?
So you want to pay attention to your big ticket items. Okay, that's going to be your roof, your foundation, your heating and cooling, your electrical, and your plumbing. That list of things can cost you a lot of money, okay?
Mm.
And those are things that you should budget for. Even if you're in a house and you don't have a problem with the heat, or you don't have a problem with the electrical or the plumbing, you should still set some money aside every month.
Mm.
Because when something breaks in one of those systems, it's going to be expensive.
Right.
You know, most of your tradesmen, your electrician or your plumber, they're going to charge you $100 just to walk in the door before they ever pick up a tool.
Mm.
Okay, so you should budget for that ahead of time. For you first time home buyers, when you are, looking at homes, don't get caught up in looking at that fancy granite countertop or the lighting. You want to look at the roof. You want to look at the foundation. Is there anything that seems odd about the electrical or the plumbing? Turn the heat up.
Mm.
There's no reason you can't turn the heat up when you're looking at a home.
Mm.
Make sure it works. And I can't tell you like how many times I go to an inspection. The client may have seen that house once, twice, maybe even more. We're walking around the outside and there's a big crack in the foundation, and they're like, "Wow, I didn't even notice that. I've been here 3 times."
Mm. Right. Right. And again, I try to uh listen, I'm not an inspector by any means, but I've done a bunch of inspections with you, so I kind of know the dance a little bit. So I just glance at those things before we get there. So yeah, we you definitely need to check those things out. And I try to do see if it passed the eye test before I bring you in. Um, but what are the most common, like, major problems that you find, like, from inspection to inspection? Like, what do you kind of see the most?
So the number one major defect that I come across, and you'd be surprised how often I find this, is water inside your electric panel.
Mm, we just had one of
Now,
those.
most people and don't know this. And when you're visiting a home, you're looking at it to like you want to purchase it. You're not going to be opening up that panel. You're not allowed to.
Right.
And there's plenty of times that I've opened up a panel and the homeowner didn't even know that they were getting water inside the panel. So what happens is if you have any kind of issue with the weatherhead or the insulation on that service wire that's connecting the power from the pole to your house, water can get inside that wire and then it follows the path of least resistance. It goes down inside the meter and then from the meter inside your panel. Then it will rust and corrode out all the connections. Obviously, water and electricity are, not a good mix to have together in your
Of
house.
course, right.
And it can be a serious potential fire hazard.
Right. And let's talk electrical for a minute. I as a first time home buyer, um, if you are getting an FHA loan, all right, we always run into, I don't want to say always, but I think one of the most common problems is the GFI outlets. Can you dive into the GFI outlets a little bit? What's the GFI outlet for the people that don't know, and why is it important?
Yeah, so GFCI stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. They are required next to water sources where, there's potential for water to get into that circuit. In a nutshell, in a layman's way of explaining it, think of it that it's monitoring the flow of electricity going out and the flow of electricity coming back. So if that electricity flows out and doesn't return, that means there's an interruption in the circuit. It will shut itself off. We like them next to water sources or anywhere that water could potentially get into the outlet, because if we say, have a toaster on the countertop and drop it into a sink full of water, we want that outlet to shut itself off. The codes are constantly changing, though, in which you need to be aware of. Well, actually, I need to be aware of that. That's my job. And in your new construction homes, the GFIs are typically now located in the service panel, not at the countertop itself. And there's been some recent changes to GFIs in islands as well. So it used to be that if an outlet was in an island, it had to be GFI protected. The new change is that they don't want outlets or on the side of islands anymore. They want them built into a bar top in that island. The issue was that if you had something plugged into a side of a island and a kid ran by and caught that cord, that appliance was falling on them. The other thing that is showing up more and more often now is the requirement for AFCIs. So an AFCI is different than a GFCI. AFCI stands for arc fault circuit interrupter. What that is doing basically is monitoring the heat in the circuit. So if it starts to overheat, arc, or short out, it will automatically shut itself off. We like those in particular, protecting the living rooms and bedrooms, because those are rooms that someone would potentially be asleep in. So the idea is that if someone's asleep in that room and the circuit's overheating, we want it to shut itself off instead of someone sleeping through a fire. In new construction, almost every circuit in your house is going to be GFCI'd or AFCI'd.
Okay. Okay. Almost every circuit? That's crazy.
Yeah, things like your the stove, the air conditioner, things like that are not required. But almost every circuit now, if you look at a brand new panel, it's all going to be GFCIs or AFCIs.
Wow. Okay. And yeah, so that's a lot. This is Ryan to tell you, like, for whatever reason, the electrical panel is probably like my favorite part of the inspection. That's when the camera comes out, is when he opens up that panel. And every time we open up a panel from house to house, there's always like something different, to how the wires are ran, and double taps. We got a thing with double taps. How, what's a double tap? Explain to them what a double tap is.
So in your service panel, you're going to have three types of wires. So you have your positive, your neutral, and your ground. Your neutrals go to a bus bar on the side, and your positive wires go to the breakers. A double tapped breaker is when you have multiple wires attached to one breaker. Now, there are some breakers that are rated to be double tapped. A lot of your square Ds and a lot of your GEs are going to be rated for double taps.
Mm-hmm.
However, the caveat is that those wires have to be the same size. So you can't have two different size wires on a breaker that's rated for double taps. The issue with double tapping is that you could be overloading that breaker.
Right.
Okay, and if that happens, that breaker is going to be tripping on you. Sometimes I've talked to people and they're like, "Oh, I have this one breaker in my house that trips all the time, and I don't know why." Well, it could be because it's double tapped. Double tap neutrals are a different ball game. So your neutrals shouldn't be double tapped for a couple of reasons. And I've actually had this discussion with multiple electricians. A lot of your old school electricians are going to say, well, I've been doing it this way for 40 years and it's fine. The screws, the little lock nuts that hold the neutral into the bus bar are designed to hold one neutral or one neutral and the ground wire. The issue is that over time, with that circuit being turned on and turned off, the copper in that wire will expand and contract. So with all that constant expansion and contraction, if there's multiple neutrals underneath that one lock nut, it can cause the lock nut to back out. Any loose connections in an electrical circuit can overheat. I have seen multiple times in my career where I've opened up a service panel and there's double tap neutrals and the insulation is melting right off the wire.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I can't. It's almost odd to open up a panel and not see at least one double tap. Like we usually take bets on if there's double taps or how many, because it's I think it's just something that's common. I don't know why. It's not my wheelhouse, but it is something that we always see. So definitely Ryan will definitely inspect that the panel and check for double taps amongst with other things. We just had an inspection last week or a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lot of rust in the panel, which is a sign of water, like he was saying. So it's always I think but for me, from what I see, the panel is always like it's always a thing with the panel. You know what I mean? So definitely get that inspected as well. But all right, let's go to a let's go to a different space. I've like I said, I've watched your Instagram, and there's always something crazy. What I don't want to scare them, but what I don't want to scare them, but what are some of the horror stories that you've seen or experienced on an inspection?
There's a video on my Instagram and you'll have to check it out. The blood splatter room.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you've seen that video.
No.
If you've ever seen Dexter, I was in a house where someone painted their room like someone was murdered in there. It was freaky.
You sure it was paint?
Yeah, it was paint. It was paint. But I did an inspection on a really old house, and you got to remember that some of these old houses, these old Victorians, I'm sure you've seen them driving around. They're beautiful buildings. The architecture in them is amazing. The woodwork is amazing. But you got to remember that some of these old houses were used as funeral homes. And I did an inspection. It was a big house. I was all alone. The realtor wasn't there. The client wasn't there. It was such a big house, it's going to take me a while. So they gave me the keys and they said, go ahead. I get down to the basement, not a single light works. Okay. So I break out my headlamp and I got a flashlight and I'm walking around in the dark and I'm just doing my job. I get to the far end of the basement and there's a big steel door. And I'm like, okay, that's different. So I open the steel door and I start walking down a hallway, and off of the hallway are these little concrete rooms. And one of the things I noticed when I'm walking around in the dark is that there's drains in the floor. So again, I'm like, okay, well, this is not normal. I get to the room in the far back, and I take one step into the room, and I stopped in my tracks, and I panned up with the flashlight, and there's two wooden coffins sitting there,
Mm.
and I looked around with my flashlight, and I was like, you know what? This room looks good from here. I think we're all set. But then I still had the rest of the basement to do, and I always like to end on the electric panels. And I can't tell you how many shadows were messing with me, or every time a noise, I was crawling out of my skin. I was so freaked out.
So this place. Oh, I got it. The steel door and the coffin. It used to be a funeral home.
Yeah,
So was it?
and there were still coffins there.
That's crazy. So was the house being sold as as a funeral home, or was it residential, or what?
This was actually it was the biggest house I've ever inspected in my career.
Mm.
Okay. I don't want to give the address
No, no,
just
no.
because of the story I just told you. But I had a realtor that I work with a lot. She called me and she said, "Hey Ryan, I got a big house for you to inspect." And I said, "Okay, no problem." And she was like, "No, you don't understand. This is a big house." I said, "Okay, well, send me the listing." She sent me the listing. It's 20,775 square feet.
Wow.
9 beds, 8 baths, multiple kitchens.
Mm.
So
So it was
that one
it
took
was
me a while. It was
residential.
being sold as a single family
I got
home.
you. Okay.
The people who are interested in buying it, I think they were going to turn it into like daycares and stuff like that.
Okay.
It needed too much work though.
Yeah.
They backed out of the deal, and I think they took it off the market for now. The For that big of a house, it had a clay tile roof,
Mm.
and the roof had been bad for years.
Mm.
So every room below where it was leaking was trashed, and for the amount that they were going to buy it in, they could probably put the equal amount back into the home.
Yeah. Wow. All right. All right. So the residential house with the coffins in the basement. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right. So we talked the other day, and all right. So you have your basic home inspection, and then you mentioned that you have different services that you offer. So outside of your basic home inspection, um, what other services do you offer?
So there's multiple kinds of inspections. So there is your basic home inspection. We're going to go through everything. That's the super thorough one. You're going to get a full report and everything. But I understand that it's a competitive market, and there are people waiving inspections out there to try to win the bidding on homes.
Mm.
A full inspection is not your only option.
Mm.
So there's a few options that I provide. One of which is what we call a walk and talk inspection.
Mhm.
Now, this is basically we're just going to walk through the home. We're going to walk around the outside, the inside, go through the basement. I'm going to visually point out things that I see that need to be repaired or should be addressed. I'll get the age and off the water heater and the furnace for you, so at least you know that going in. And it's something that you need to take your own notes because there's not a report.
Mm.
The board of for home inspectors, the licensing board, it was a debate a couple years ago whether or not we're allowed to do these inspections.
Mhm.
They were gonna say no, they were gonna stop that, but then the argument was made like there's nothing that stops like your grandfather or your father or your uncle who was in the construction business to walk through the home with you and do the same exact thing.
Mhm.
So if you're going to do that, why not hire a professional who's trained to look for these things?
Mhm.
So the walk and talk inspections they're a lot cheaper, first of all.
Mhm.
And you could still say that you're waiving your inspection, but you just want to do a walkthrough.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of your way of getting around the whole waiving the inspection thing with still being able to speak to an inspector and have an inspector go through the house.
Nice.
Another option is 4-point.
Mhm.
So let's say you don't want to go the full inspection, all right? You're trying to save a little bit of money, but you still want to know about those important parts of the homes, those few things I listed earlier. So a 4-point inspection is about half the cost of a normal inspection, but I'm going to check 4 or 5 things. That's it. All right, I'm going to check the roof, foundation, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. So it's a smaller report that's not as much involved, but it can be more cost effective if you're on a budget. The other thing I do is if you're selling a home, you had mentioned this earlier. You went to the home, took care of some things before you put it on the market. I do also do pre-sale inspections. So if you're going to sell your house and you want to catch anything that may be an issue before a buyer gets their inspector in, and now the whole process comes to a screeching halt because they found, let's say, water in the panel or something like that, I can find it ahead of time before you list your house so you can get it fixed, and then makes the whole process go a lot easier. I actually did a pre-sale inspection on a house they're selling for 1.3 million. The buyers were so happy with my report, they waived their own inspection. They closed in less than a month.
And that's a great point. That's a great idea. And I honestly think I'm going to start using that service more. It makes a lot of sense. Especially in this in this market with this climate. Um, yeah, definitely. I appreciate you bringing that up. Um, I I have this conversation with first time home buyers all the time, especially the buyers that are, getting like down payment assistance, or something like that. And there's it's a misconception on how it's worded, and also people, just the lack of knowledge in the process. So a lot of people think that because I have down payment assistance, they're going to pay for my down payment, and so I don't need to come to the table with any money. And I always tell them, you're going to need money for your earnest money deposit. Number one, the down payment assistance is not going to cover that. And then number two, your home inspection. You got to cover your home inspection, and then your appraisal are the three big things that you're going to need up front. Um, but what's the cost range that a buyer should expect for a home inspection?
So if we're not talking like a walk and talk or a 4 point, my base is $400 up to 3,000 square feet. Okay, if you're gonna go bigger homes, it kind of scales up after that 3,000 square feet. So a minimum of $400. Then there's other things that you can add. So you could add radon testing, you can add termite inspections, you can add water tests. There's all kinds of things that could be in your water. If you are buying a house with a well that's not city water, I highly, highly recommend having that water tested, because the well could be deteriorated, there could be bacteria in it, there's all kinds of different things that could be in the well water. Water testing varies depending on what kind of test you're getting. And I have 7 or 8 different tests that I can do. Most people will go with your general potability, radon in the water, and then like a pressure and flow test on the house. If you're looking for a range, I would recommend budgeting anywhere from $400 at the base up to $1,000.
Mm, okay.
A ballpark depending on what you're going to need. If there's well water, obviously it's going to be more expensive. Radon is, some people test for it, some people don't. You should know that most houses, almost every house has some level of radon in it. It's just a matter of whether it's a healthy level or a not healthy level.
Right. Right. And so, all right. So you just kind of, we talked about a lot of the things that you inspect, and some things that you've seen. So what are the limitations? Like, what can't you inspect? Are there any things that you can't inspect?
Yeah, so there's a list of things I cannot do. Okay. Um, First of all is I cannot give you prices
Mm,
on repairs. Okay, even though I came from a construction background, I've done this work, I am not allowed to give you a price for repairs, because I could say quote you one price, and then the contractor you hire comes in at a completely different price.
right.
So I get clients who ask me all the time, how much is this going to cost?
Mhm.
And, maybe I can give you a ballpark range, but I can't tell you exactly. You need to talk to a contractor. So I can't give you prices.
Mhm.
I can't dismantle parts of the house.
Mhm.
Okay. So I can't take things apart. If there is a stain in the ceiling, I cannot rip open that drywall to see if there's a pipe behind it that's leaking.
Mhm.
All right. Don't believe what you see on TV. Okay. HGTV, that's scripted. That's TV.
Mhm.
Okay. I get people who tell me, well, Homes on Homes does it. Well, guess what? I'm not Homes on Homes. Um, I cannot put a hammer through a wall to open it up to see what's behind it. Okay. The issue is that if, let's say, I do open up a wall, rip open a wall because there's staining or something like that, and then you back out of the home or back out of the deal, now that seller is going to be really mad at me for putting holes in their walls or holes in their ceiling. So I cannot alter the home. When we leave there, it has to be in the same condition as when we got there.
Mhm. But and so even with that being said, I obviously you take off the panel on the cover on the electrical panel, and I've also seen you take off the panel on the furnace. So those are different.
Yeah, because we're returning them to the condition they were when we got there.
Got you.
And, that's really a benefit to the client too. Like you mentioned, there's so many defects that we find within the panel. There's almost always something.
Mhm.
When I take off the panel on the furnace, we're looking for a lot of different things.
Mhm.
But for example, yesterday I did a three family, and one of the furnaces has been there since 1984.
Mm.
And when I took the panel off, it has what we call a flame rollout.
Mhm.
So
I saw that
the
video.
gaskets, yeah, the gaskets around the flame chamber have been worn away, and now when that furnace starts up and the flames start, the flames are escaping out of the flame chamber where they are not supposed to be, and it becomes a major fire hazard. One of the videos I posted recently, you can follow that burn mark all the way up to where there's a PVC pipe. Now, PVC, you got to remember, plastic is fuel,
Mm.
it's flammable. So we had flames that were coming out of the furnace and that were charring this PVC, and luckily we caught it before there was an actual fire.
Mm. And so you, not to say too much, but do you know if the sellers they didn't know about that?
No, they had no clue.
Wow.
Most of the time, your average homeowner is not going to open up their panel. They're actually not allowed to. You're not supposed to open up your electric panel. So please, people watching this, don't start opening up your panels. Hire a professional. You can pull the cover off of your heating system. It comes off real easy. Sometimes it's just two little screws. Sometimes you just lift up on it and it'll open up. If you have a boiler, that's different. That's a contained unit. You can't open that up. But if you're working with a forced air furnace, you can open it up and take a look. But most people aren't going to do that.
Right.
It's out of sight, it's out of mind. And the people living there, they had no idea that they're ready to have a fire in the house. You should at least get your furnace or boiler serviced every single year.
Right.
And that's not only just maintenance on the heating system, but it's also a way for them to find anything like that that could be a serious concern before it becomes a safety hazard.
So one more thing, real quick. I know that you've definitely offered to me, so I'm going to assume that you offer it as well. So even if you're not in the purchase process, right? Even if you're not selling, you just live in your home, you've been there for a while, and you want to know, you're starting to notice some things, and you want to know what's going on. Would you come in and inspect the home for that homeowner as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually one of the inspections I left out when we were talking about different types of inspections.
Hmm.
It's what we call a standing inspection.
Hmm.
A standing inspection is when the house is not being bought or sold. You live there.
Right.
But maybe you've lived there 10, 20 years, and you're not trained like an inspector to look for these things.
Hmm.
Uh, I call it a gift and a curse. I can't even drive down the road without looking at houses and being like, well, that one needs a new chimney and that one needs a new roof, and so that's my job, and it's I can't turn it off.
Right.
Um, so there could be things going on in your home that you just don't know about.
Mm.
All right. It could be in the panel, it could be in the furnace, it could be plumbing or electrical issues. It could be something in the attic. A lot of, these houses, especially old ones, have a little tiny crawl space that goes up into the attic, a little hatch. So I do offer standing inspections, and it's just a way for you to know what your house needs for maintenance and for repairs. Now, just because you bought a home doesn't mean that you could just put your wallet on a shelf and think that you're fine. Just pay the mortgage and you're great. No, you got to budget for maintenance, because things are going to break. If I can promise you anything, I will promise you that things will break in your house. All right. It's just the nature of the beast. So you're gonna have to fix things and repair things every now and then. So if you want to keep up a comprehensive list of what needs to be repaired that you can prioritize, because there's going to be some things that are small defects and some things that are big defects.
Right.
The small defects maybe you could put off for a little while and then prioritize your big defects. I can come in, do basically a full inspection. You'll get a full report with everything broken down into it, and then you can itemize a list of things for repairs. That this service is also really, really useful if you are a landlord.
Mm.
Okay. If you're buying your first house and it's a multifamily, which is honestly a really good idea, I'm sure you know, Jerard,
Mhm.
that's a really, really smart business move, because you can live in part of the home and you can have your tenants help subsidize your mortgage.
Correct.
If you get the right situation, they might be paying most of your mortgage for you.
Mm.
But you want to make sure that they're not going to destroy your property.
Mhm.
So when it comes to tenants destroying their property or tenants getting evicted, you need to have proof that they're damaging your property. That can help you in court.
Mm.
So if you're a landlord and you need proof that the tenant is damaging your property, we can do these standing inspections. I go in, I can document what is going on and the conditions of the home, and then you have that as well.
That's fire. That's a great point. Great idea. A lot of landlords I know kind of do that, try to do that themselves, or they might send their contractor to check it out. But it's definitely a great point and a great idea to send a licensed inspector by just to check things out. Another thing with multifamily investing, I don't I listen to these gurus on Instagram, and everybody's got a method, but it is very hard to determine how a person lives, how a tenant lives, right? And even showing a house, a multifamily or whatever, you go into some of these places and everybody lives different, is what I'm gonna say. And if you're a landlord, 9 times out of 10, you're not going there every day. You're not going into the apartment even once a month, for that matter. You'll probably go in when they move in, and you probably won't see it again until they move out. So it's definitely good and a lot of landlords also put in the lease that you can have inspections periodically, once a quarter or twice a year or whatever. But it's definitely a good idea to bring Ryan with you to check out the things that might be beyond the obvious, that you can't see. So that's a great point, man.
I just talked to a realtor yesterday. He has a lot of properties. He does property management and owns a bunch of multifamilies.
Mhm.
And he was telling me that he has a tenant who um, is damaging the property
Mhm.
to the point that he's pursuing an eviction.
Mm.
And he went to court, and they threw it out of court because he said, well, it's my property. I went there. Here's some pictures of stuff that they're doing. The judge wouldn't accept it because he was not a third party licensed
Mm.
professional.
Wow.
They said, come back when you have documentation from a third party licensed professional.
Mm.
So he couldn't even get the tenant out, even though they're destroying his property.
So did he hire you to go back? Did you have to go check it out?
Well, I just had this conversation yesterday,
Yesterday?
so I'll let you know
Oh,
later.
okay. Got you. Give me his number. I'll close him for you. So yeah, no, that's a great point, man, and I hope that the listeners take advantage of it, man. How can they get in touch with you if they want to do a standard inspection or just use you for any of your services?
Phone call or text is the best way to get a hold of me. I am in Massachusetts. I do service all of Connecticut.
Mhm.
All right, I'll travel the whole state, and I service most of Massachusetts as well. I try not to head into Boston.
Mhm.
All you got to do is give me a phone call. My number's behind me. It's 413-519-6124. You can shoot me a text. You can email me, but you just got to keep in mind that I am a busy guy. I do a lot of driving, and when I'm doing inspections, I can't, check my email or. So honestly, the best way to get a hold of me would be a phone call or a text, and then I can get you scheduled and go from there.
Definitely, man. Listen, I appreciate all that you have done for me and our clients. Definitely one of the best in the game for sure. Um, any final advice before we get out of here for first time home buyers going through this process?
Okay, I'm gonna say this and you're gonna laugh, but and I'm not saying it because I'm in the industry, but don't skip your home inspection.
For sure.
Okay, there's a lot that we can find that could potentially be a major health hazard or a safety hazard.
Mhm.
Okay, talk about water and electric panels, potential fire situations, knob and tube wiring. There's a lot that you can't see just walking through that home. All right, bug damage, termites, carpenter ants, they cause a ton of damage.
Mm.
So the last thing that you want to do is, especially if you're on a budget, is buy a home that's going to be a money pit.
Mm.
Okay. If you don't have the funds to repair that home, the home is going to fall into disrepair.
Mm.
And then it's exponential. So it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. If it doesn't get repaired, it's just going to get worse and worse and more expensive as time goes.
Mhm.
So I understand the market's tough. I get it. But if you can, I do not recommend to waive your home inspection, or at least get a 4-point
Mhm.
or a walk and talk. 4-point would be better than a walk and talk, but if all you can do is a walk and talk, at least get that. That way you're getting the opinion of another licensed professional who is trained to look for these defects.
For sure. For sure. So I'm gonna I have you're in the home buyers hub, the Facebook group. Also, so if you have any quick questions, you can ask questions in the home buyers hub, and Ryan's in there. He can answer any of your questions. If you're not a member of the home buyers hub, join the home buyers hub Facebook group. I put a link in the description of this episode. Also, we had, yes, when was it, Thursday, I did a webinar exclusively for the folks in the home buyers hub thinking about purchasing a home, and how my team is able to get first time home buyers in their home even in this busy market. And now I've decided that I'm going to do that weekly. Okay, and that's exclusive for people in the home buyers hub, so you're going to want to make sure you join the home buyers hub. I'm in there, Ryan's in there. Ryan, you saw that you were on, and I didn't even know you were on. But what did you think about that webinar I did?
I think it was great. It was really informational.
Mhm.
You're trying to not repeat yourself, but you're going to have these conversations anyway. But any first time home buyer, there's a lot to unpack. You need to know the process
Correct.
because, buying real estate is a process. There's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of people involved,
Mhm.
there's a lot of time invested as well.
Mhm.
So you need to be prepared going into that, know how much time is involved, what you're going to need, the steps,
Mhm.
and the webinar can help you as like a beginner tutorial
For sure.
on what that process is.
And the young lady that came on, I said that, but that's not what I meant. Like I'm gonna repeat myself every day until I get out of this business. You know what I mean? Like so
Yeah.
it's that's what's supposed to happen, and it's not that I don't want to repeat myself, but I just found out. I figured that I'm having these good conversations one on one. And I figured it's just a better way to have the conversation with more people. And I know that even after you get off of that webinar, we're going to talk about it again. You know what I mean? But I just really wanted to create a space where we can all learn together, you know what I mean? Type of thing. And you can, ask questions freely and look at I had some active clients that I'm working with right now, even on it, and um, everybody's kind of learning together. It's a community, and that was the whole point. But I did say, I said I don't want to have to keep repeating myself, but that's not what I meant.
Hey, I do the same thing in my job, you
Right.
know. I'm sure a lot of the things that I've said you've heard me say hundreds of
Hundreds of
times
times.
already.
I know your whole spiel.
But yeah, but that's part of my job too.
Mhm.
Okay. Gerard, myself, everyone that you're going to interact with as part of a real estate transaction is there to help educate you.
Correct.
That's how I like to approach my job and what I do. I'm not just there to point out what's wrong and what needs to be fixed.
Mm.
I'm there to educate you about your house and how it works.
Mm.
And because I've come from such a long construction background and maintenance background, when we're walking around, I encourage you to walk around with me,
Mhm.
point things out, ask questions. Learning about the home is part of the home inspection,
Mm.
and I can go over general maintenance with you. There's so many things, especially as a first-time home buyer, that you might not be aware of.
Right.
Your gutters. You should clean your gutters at least 4 times a year,
Mm.
twice in the spring, twice in the fall. If you've never owned a home, maybe you don't know that. But if your gutters aren't working right, it literally could end up relating to roof leaks, ice dams, water in your basement. So when I'm walking around with clients, I'm not just there to point things out that need to be fixed. I'm there to teach you about your house and how to maintain it and keep it a happy, safe home for years to come.
For sure. For sure. Definitely. And yeah, I think I'm in the same boat, man. We aim to educate so that way you can make educated decisions. You know what I mean? eh, Look, we could keep going all day, Ryan. So this is what we're gonna do. I'll get with you one day, maybe one day this week or even next week or whenever you have time. You are more than welcome. We can go stream live into the Home Buyers Hub and just have casual conversation, and educate some more people. I love the conversation we had here today, and I appreciate you coming, taking time out of your busy day, and educating people, man. So I just want to appreciate you, Ryan. I'll let you know that I appreciate you. Um, and we're gonna keep doing business with each other. I said it once, I'll say it again. I have curated a team, people. I have curated a team. When I make my congratulation posts to my clients for purchasing their home, I'm tagging my team in there because I definitely don't do it alone. I rely on, all of these guys, all these professionals to do their job. There's a lot of moving parts in the real estate transaction, and you got to be able to depend on the people that you work with to do their job. And Ryan is definitely one of the best at what he does. Um,
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
nah, for sure, man. So again, join the First Time Home Buyers Hub and the Facebook group on Facebook, First Time Home Buyers Hub. Um, I'll be putting out the dates within the next couple of days of the exclusive webinars for the Home Buyers Hub. Um, this is the First Time Home Buyers podcast. We stream every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, before you get your weekend started. go check out some open houses today. There's a lot of open houses on the market. Go check out some open houses. Tell them I sent you, and they'll roll out the red carpet for you. I promise. um, um, and what else? What else am I forgetting? I think that's it for right now. You can hit up Ryan at uh, Cornerstone Home Inspections LLC.com. And what's your IG, Ryan?
Cornerstone 413.
Cornerstone 413 on Instagram. And I'm telling you, it's very entertaining at the least. He shows some crazy stuff. He put one of my properties up there not too long ago, so I must have fell in that category of that property must have fell in that category of some of the crazy things it was though.
I know. You tell me you try to pick houses that where you're not going to end up on my Instagram.
Yeah, I don't want to end up on his Instagram at all. But but no, definitely informative and entertaining. So check out his Instagram. And we will catch you next week. Thanks for joining. Have a good one.